Who would be a Wolves fan, eh?
On goes Bull. People might yet win it here for Wolves. Flash in the shot. What a goal!
Hello and welcome to today's episode of Wolves Fancast, part of the 19 Min Football Network. 2 wins in 2 games. Could you really believe it? Joining me to talk about yesterday's win against Brentford, we've got Stu.
Hello.
We've got Jafo.
Good evening.
And we've got Matt.
How do you do it?
I was going to say, I feel like I've done you a disservice there, Matt, by just going by Matt. Do I now get to call you Sky Sports?
I consider myself more freelance.
Don't want to be tied down to one. Don't want to be tied down to one company.
TV personality will do.
What about professional talking head?
Yeah, they'll do. They'll do for me, mate. I've been called worse.
Yeah, I feel like we need to stretch out a title, like on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
You can get quite creative job titles, should we say?
Sandwich artist if you work at Subway.
Exactly. I feel like we could mold something. For context, for everyone who's tuned in live or is listening on playback, big thank you for joining us. Matt, as part of his, I was going to call it a side hustle. That sounds a bit nefarious. It really isn't. Basically,
like the Pied Piper of the blind.
Is that the official tagline?
That's my LinkedIn thing.
Perfect. Anyway, Matt was on Sky Sports on the weekend, and would you like to divulge a little bit more?
So it was part of the initiative. It was the Wolfpack weekend anyway, and it's part of a volunteer service that Alan March Sport provide to give commentary to the blind and visually disabled in the ground, essentially. Listen to a little receiver, you hear me and some of the other volunteers, just to enhance the match day experience for those that can't see all of the games. So it was a piece by the always excellent and friend of the Fancast, Johnny Phillips, and he followed us around with some cameras, spoke to some of the supporters who used the service and interviewed yours truly. So yeah, it was a great experience.
No, it's really good. And is it true I've watched it back a couple of times because, I think it's fantastic what you're doing. Did you try and blink subscribe to Wolves Fancast in Morse code?
Yeah, it was. I think I used American Morse code, though, so you can't quite work it out.
That's probably why. I was going to say, usually I plug it at the end of the show. I'm just going to do it now because that was an insanely awful cheap bit I put in. But if you've not already subscribed to us on YouTube, make sure you do so. We have got 2,000 subscribers now, and we're kind of consistently putting out new and fresh content twice a week, sometimes more. We've got the fantastic preview show, the fairly competent reaction show, which we're doing right now, and the always excellent Gully's tactical analysis. We're talking just before we got on the air how we're on a bit of a silly mood, but we're going to talk about Brentford and us doing really well yet again. Different performance to one against Chelsea. In my eyes, one of our performances of the season.
Really?
Yeah, I think chiefly because of how I've seen us crumble a lot of the time this season is my main kind of takeaway for it. But a lot of talk was how we'd approach the game, considering how against Chelsea we were that little bit more defensively minded. So in terms of the team, there was only sort of one change in it. Were you all happy with it, Stu?
Yeah, I mean, I very rarely react to team lineups on the Wolves Twitter account when it comes out because it's just asking for trouble a lot of the time with it. It's a battle of the super fans and the permanently depressed so you jump into one camp or the other with that kind of thing. And I just kind of put like a little chef's kiss kind of gif up there because it was what we asked for. We didn't want him messing about, and he seems to have learned over the last few weeks or so he doesn't have to change everything all the time. And now we've got a semi-consistent team. And I thought, to be fair, the only place available was that Sarabia slotted into. So I was strangely excited for a lineup, which has not happened for a long time.
Yeah, it almost seems like he's stumbled upon a consistent starting 11. I think, Jafo, we talked before how he'd kind of pretty much nailed that back four, plus or minus Bueno. He kind of got an idea of what he wanted to do in midfield, particularly with Lamina and Nunes to a degree. And we kind of just hadn't quite worked out that front line. But I don't know whether it's through, we'll talk Neves in a bit, but I think it's mainly Kuna actually getting a bit of game time that seems to be the thing that's kind of getting that spine of the team a lot more consistent.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with that, because I think Cunha is probably one of the, if not the most important people in that 11 now, because he links the team up well. And the one thing that we've struggled with in the past, especially with under Bruno and even with Nuno as well in the past, that his linking the midfield and attack has always been a bit of a problem, especially because we've always looked to go long down the channels or look to hit the ball long to try and hit people. And to have this person who can come drop and pick the ball up deep and help to transition sort of between midfield and attack is important. And Cunha did that really, really well again yesterday, especially even improving on what he did against Chelsea as well, which was good. And he looks good value for getting goals and potentially assists. He made a couple of mistakes yesterday in the first 10, 15 minutes. He struggled to get into the pace of the game, but as he went on, I thought he did brilliantly, and he was probably one of the better players on the pitch by the end of the game.
No, completely agree. We've had a YouTube comment come in to completely sidetrack any talk about Wolves. But Stu, are you like £270 of danger, or does someone in W4 look like you? No, I don't believe you're W4.
Where is that?
I want to say W4's Billy Wright.
Billy Wright, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought you meant postcode wise.
Part of me did when it came first.
Yeah.
Like, Stu's not from Penn.
No, is that well?
Stu's not
there we are.
from... Yeah,
I'm so not from there. I didn't even know that's where it was.
it's W4 Penn.
Yeah,
I don't know why.
yeah. That's
in
exactly
my head, I'm
where I
looking.
am. You can come and find me, abuse me in person.
Billy Wright upper, as the commenter suggests.
No.
So,
I was in Billy Wright upper for 18 months when I was 11 to 12 years old. Ever since then, I've been in J4 for life. So
yeah, I think I'm the only one from the fancast who sits Billy right up.
through choice as well.
Through choice as well. Yeah,
I was going to say
that says a lot about me, though, doesn't it? I'm not going to lie.
And that you've got more money than sense.
But he likes a nice view, and being able to get to the toilets at any time of convenience isn't like being in the Steve Bulupper.
Never been a problem.
Too Billy Wright.
I was going to say, I feel like, judging by Matt going to right and Stu going, never been a problem, we could go down a path about toilet situations. But you know what? Let's not. So, my thoughts are on Brentford, because I don't know. I've been trying to work out what I think about Brentford for a lot of this season, because they're doing well in the league, but they've been quietly sinking like a stone the last month or so, haven't they, Matt?
Yeah, they have. I think a lot of people actually pre-game expected this to be the bigger challenge out of Brentford and Chelsea, and the form book, though, as you know, that it wasn't making for good reading if you were a Brentford fan. Dare say, there's no threat to them of relegation, obviously. With the teams around them just winning dramatically, winning it all the time now as well, I think they're kind of... Can we actually put them down, categorize them as the first team on the beach? It felt that way yesterday.
Ooh.
It felt like they were already... there was so little fight in that team. I couldn't believe how kind of lackadaisical they were, and how it just didn't look like they wanted it. And flip side over to a Wolves that really looked up for it. it was a surprise because on paper, I thought this was going to be really tough.
Yeah, it's the first time since Brentford have got promoted that we haven't seen that shithousery side as much from them. Like,
yeah, for sure.
If I described them as like the modern day Stoke, not in terms of how they play, apart from they do love a long throw in, they have just got that little bitty edge to them where they don't give an absolute shit if they're getting pelters from a home side as they drag a game out.
I mean, they did try. They did try yesterday, but I think we were just effective in the time that we had the ball and created enough chances to frustrate them.
Well, I mean, to be fair, the stats add up across the game. I know Thomas Frank came out with some comments after the game that it was a game of fine margins, but we dominated all the key areas of what we needed to. We had more passes, we had more shots on target, we had slightly higher possession, and it just felt that Wolves got the mental side of the game right, which they've not always done this season.
Yeah, and I think we didn't get drawn into their, like Jeffo said, their silly little games, which they were still trying. There was still a few like throwing delays after about 15 minutes, and there was a few times where they were throwing themselves to the floor. And we'll get onto it later. There might be reasons behind more discipline in the squad for a change, but not rising to it. You could see that it pissed them off more because it didn't work. All them things that they tried, the dark arts, just didn't work anymore. It's like, well, 4 times, well, whatever the 4th time is, I'm going to think of it then. But it is like we've been done over so many times in the last couple of years by them that it was never going to happen again under a different manager. And finally, at last, it was, let's say bittersweet, but there was nothing bitter about it. It was glorious just to see them wilt like they are, because they have had our number. And we've talked before about how shit teams have our number. We know that happens every year, regardless of who comes up. There's always at least one. But Brentford are just that annoyance, like Stoke were. You are kind of right with that, Rich. But there was. I think the discipline in the side helped towards nullifying their nonsense as well, quite a lot.
Yeah, I think a large part of that is that pivot in midfield of Lamina and Gomez, because we talk about shithousery, and I wouldn't necessarily call either of them shithouses, but they do not give a fuck, and I love them for it. And I mean, Gomez in particular, how he just bounds through tackles and the work rate of getting around the pitch. I know he picked up a booking and got subbed, arguably because of that, but just his sheer disregard for whoever he is playing against, he wants that ball, and I love it. And obviously he's that step beyond it because he knows what to do when he gets it back. He's not like it's David Davis, for example. And again, and Lamina just seems to be João Gomez, but 10 years on.
Yeah,
in terms of his experience and just knowing. Let's say there's points where just he breaks at the play, plays the ball forward, and you're seeing him just progressing his run.
You know what? Lamina is the player that Gully thought Dendoncker was. That's, you know what I mean? How the amount of work that he constantly gets through. It's true though. He's the only person in this group who had some kind of fawning for him. And Dendoncker was Dendoncker. He did Dendoncker things, not very well, but okay all the time. But bring the one. But Lamina does everything properly, and you can see he's got quality and he's got distribution sometimes. Dendoncker had none of these things, and he was a constantly 6 out of 10, with the occasional time where he did something fluky. Lamina is what we should have had 4 years ago, and we said when we bought him in that he's the player that we'd missed since Big Alf left us. And then we've got him, and look what happens.
Wow.
Lovely. I mean,
statement time.
Problem is, part of me wants to disagree with it because I really like Dendoncker. But you're completely right. We said it. We said it when we said it when Traore joined in the summer.
Yeah,
didn't we? And we're like, oh, crap. This is a midfielder who actually isn't just chasing shadows or marking space, and it's it is refreshing to see. And I say that as someone who likes Dendoncker, but you could argue they're chalk and cheese as players, though, right? So someone be the antithesis of Stu, please.
There's no answer, is there? This is the problem.
No, I can't do it. I can't. I would love to defend Leander because he actually played well for Villa. When watching him yesterday in the early kickoff, he played fairly well. But at Wolves, it's become stagnant, and the role that he was being asked to do ended up not playing to any of his strengths. So he's doing everything that he didn't need to do badly, and everything that he could do, he wasn't doing. So he was worth fuck all value.
Yeah, I think Jafar's right there. I think right player, wrong manager for me. Consistently misused. The amount of times he ended up being one-on-one against an opposition goalkeeper was absolutely criminal. Do you know what I mean? So I think he was history won't be kind to Dendoncker, I don't think, and I'm not necessarily 100% convinced it's his fault.
He had 6 months after he came into the team, and he was great, and then he messed up at Wembley, and it was all downhill there. But that is life.
Yeah, I think similar comments on YouTube. Lamina and Donk were used much differently. Donk was used much more like Nunes. Don't miss Donk getting into the box and blowing it over the bar all the time. Because, yeah, there were points where he just played as almost like a right winger, and it was jarring to look at. But interestingly, yesterday, there was a lot of talk about how Wolves would actually line up. And I think Matheus Nunes obviously seems to have really kicked on the last couple of games, and he almost played wide as a wide right midfielder. When you I've pulled up for the audio listeners a bit of a heat map in terms of where he played. He almost played, let's say, on the right side in midfielder, and again, it just seems to have brought out the best in him.
I mean, it's been highly talked about his ball carrying ability, but he found himself in attacking positions so much more frequently. But I think this was more of a Brentford failing than anything, because they committed when they did commit men forward. It felt like at times we were playing against like 9 men, because they just weren't tracking back Brentford, and they just left us with these absolute cavernous acres of space to run into. And I thought to myself, like, is there something going on here? Like, are we already 3 or 4-0 up and they're having to commit men forward? Because we just seem to have, I don't know if it's just the speed and the intensity of how we countered, but it just felt like we had acres of space. And that for Matheus is just an absolute dream, because he loves to carry that ball forward. And, as we saw for the second, doesn't make a difference if he's got 3 players in front of him, because he'll dance around you anyway. But when he hasn't got that space, he'll carry as much as he wants.
Yeah.
I think Rico Henry was still thought he was playing for Worsley. He was that far down the line. He was playing at the best Scott.
I do think that was funny that Rico Henry, after what Billy was saying last week on the preview show, that Rico Henry went off the very moment that Traore came on.
Yeah, love that.
I was thinking about, you look at that heat map, and have we played with such a narrow midfield since the glory days of Glenn Hoddle, when we were playing with a diamond lights? Because you look at the Sarabia and Nunes, where they weren't wingers, and we didn't play with wing backs either, but yet it worked perfectly. I don't really know what this formation is. It's just like a. Go on, Jeffo. This is your area of expertise more than any of us. What is that?
They line up almost like a 4-2-2-2-2, which I think, if anyone's not seen Tifo's latest episode about Wolves, Tim Spears actually describes it perfectly. But yeah, they almost play with 2 attacking midfielders. So Sarabia and Nunes have got like sort of freedom to come inside and sort of drift into space as is needed, which is what we saw yesterday, because we saw Sarabia often picking up the ball in the centre of the park behind Gomez or even Lamina at times. So that license to create space and to move and to play with fluidity plays to the strengths of the players that we've got, which has been refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the thing that sticks out to me on the heat map is how concise it looks as an actual formation, particularly when you kind of compare it to Brentford's lineup, which, obviously they're chasing the game, so you're going to have players left, right, and centre. But, it's fairly discernible that there's, 2 4s and a 2 up top. But it's how close your kind of key players are. So you've got Kuna and Costa obviously occupying the same areas of the pitch, which they had great link-up play yesterday. And you've also got your 2 centre midfielders playing quite tight together as well. And it looks a hell of a lot more balanced than games that we've seen first half of the season, arguably into some of Lopetegui's early games as well, where he's still kind of figuring it out. And I feel like that's paying a lot of dividends. And yeah, Brentford weren't great yesterday. Don't get me wrong. But yeah, it just feels a lot more system driven. It's just
I thought it felt a lot more structured yesterday. Like the second that Costa won that ball, he knew exactly where he was going, and Cunha he wasn't an anchor in a defensive sense, but the amount of times that ball was played into him and then spread left or right, and there was like little triangles that were being played, and it wasn't quite tiki-taka or anything like that, but it just felt so much more by design than by sheer fluke that we were getting the ball into attacking positions. It felt so much more composed than what we were used to. Now, the irony of that is when Neves came off against Leeds, it felt like we'd lost our shape and identity and we lost everything. But actually, we seemed really composed and we were sticking to a game plan yesterday without that catalyst.
That's probably a very apt segue to talk about what is somewhat of an elephant in the room in terms of what do we do regarding Ruben Neves, because it has been a little bit, no Neves, no problem, which it is great, but taking aside what we should be doing next Saturday, do we think the performances for the last 2 games have been because he's not playing or in spite of him not playing? I think we've got that the right way around, but are we essentially better without Ruben Neves, or is everyone just having to work that bit harder and things like that because our best players unavailable? And I've been rattling my brain because obviously, I could sing the praises of our centre midfielders all day, but Stu, me and you, we had a conversation on a podcast about a month ago, didn't we? About how do you get the best out of Mateus Nunes and Ruben Neves in this format? What formation can you get the best out of your best players? And we didn't really have an answer for it.
Yeah, and it was. We go back to the tweet that I said when we signed all these players in January that Neves wasn't the best midfielder at the club anymore, and he's not. It's a fact. It's a fact. I don't care how much of a legend he is. That's undisputed. But we can't be sentimental about things. You got to look at it this way. We're safe anyway. I've said all along, never in danger. But from a sensible point of view, you look towards next season now. Say, okay, 1 more win to be safe. You look towards next season. Neves, he might still be here. I don't think he's going to get the move that people think he is. He's going to get, same as Traoré last year. So you got to go with the premise that. And the understanding that he might not be here anyway, and if he is, then fine, you work around it later on. But we've had 2 games now where it's the most coherent we've played all season long. In 31 games, 2 of them he wasn't part of. Just happened to be the 2 games where we played really well. And I know we've said that Brentford weren't very good and Chelsea weren't very good either. But we've played so many games against rubbish teams who have beaten us, comprehensively beaten us anyway, despite being shit. So I don't think he can just swan back in. We've got a system that works now with players that are going to be here for the long term. You'd think, well, Lamina's maybe 2 or 3 years' time, but even so, you've still got Boubacar Traoré to come in and play exactly the same kind of role. If Neves can adapt to that, and he shouldn't get a free pass to come straight back in. Absolutely no way. He starts on the bench and then bring him in later on when Joe Gomez inevitably gets tired or booked, or Lamina needs to come out, because we've seen that Neves can run around and tackle like the best of them at times. But this without him there, look what's happened to Mateus. Look what's happened to João Gomes himself. Look what's happened. The left-hand side seems to be a problem with Podence didn't really shine last week, and Sarabia was fine for me. I know Dan and Luke obviously hate him with a passion, but for me, he did nothing really wrong, but he didn't excel. But the rest of the team did, and when Neves isn't part of that, you can't then break that up to bring him back just because he's club captain and he's our top goal scorer by default because we're shit at scoring goals. It just doesn't make sense to me. And I know it's sentiment and all that kind of thing, the same with Raul, but you just got to move on. You just got to see what's actually there in front of you and not play to your heart all the time. And for me, that means leaving Neves on the bench and bringing him on later.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's two key areas with it. I feel that I think Rich already touched on it beautifully, and the key word for one of it is balance. It just with Neves at the team, we have the balance. We've seen it. It's there for everyone to see. We get the most out of Nunes. We get the most out of Lamina. We get the most out of the forward players. I mean, it's no great surprise that Diego Costa now has his first goal, and Hwang has played probably better as well in the last couple of games, albeit off the bench. And I think the second one is that there is an emotional discipline to the team now. The last two games, we've seen nothing of players surrounding referees, getting on referees' cases. Because all four of us here, we're not exactly great fans of referees, and we all accept that they make stupid decisions and do stupid fucking things. But the way that Neves often approaches things by getting on and down the referee's throat, like he's Roy Keane in prime Man United days, isn't really helpful to anyone, and it isn't really helpful to the team, and setting us up for failure and setting us up for making us into an emotional state that we make mistakes. And again, especially against a team like we were saying earlier, against a team like Brentford, who are going to come here and try and do these sort of like dark arts things. If we get drawn into it in an emotional way, we're going to fuck up. And not having him around has made everything a little bit more calmer, and the team's been able to perform in the right way, and everything's just seemed a little bit more consistent and almost a little bit more sort of, I don't know the word I'd probably use to describe it, but it's a bit more, we'd understand what we expect. It's more expected in the way that we perform, which is nice. So there's less erratic behaviour, I think is probably the best way of putting it.
Well, go on, Matt.
Well, I think we deserve everything we get with this fickle attitude. To be honest,
giving it some Matt.
No, I don't necessarily disagree that we have looked like more balanced. I don't disagree with anything that's been said, but what I do think, one swallow doesn't make a summer, and two results don't necessarily change the fact that he's been key for us for so many times. But that doesn't earn him a spot back in the side. Completely agree. I think when we're playing against teams where we need to control and be calm, I think it's more beneficial to have that experience in a Neves than, I don't think you can say that Chelsea or Brentford attacked us in absolute droves and we had our backs against the wall, and we were incredibly lucky to get away with the victories. I don't know. Listen, he's on the Mount Rushmore, Neves, with your Wrights, your Bulls, and your Miliasses. He's up there. It's undeniable, and I don't think he should come straight back into the squad. But I think some of the narrative that I'm hearing online is it's in the extreme, saying, well, that might be the last time we've seen him in the shirt, and it should be, and everything else. I just there needs to be some reasonable balance to it, much like the squad is needed. I think there's still a place for him in the squad. Maybe it's at 60 minutes. Maybe it's now in that Moutinho role that he's filling, where we need to see that game out. Maybe that's the case, but I think we need to rein it in a little bit on this anti-Neves sentiment. You know what? Here's a great one as well. This is the internet sleuth of the Wolves Twitter fan. Oh, well, he never put anything on about the wins on his Instagram. Who gives a shiny shit? Why does that matter to anybody? It really shouldn't make a difference. Don't let it ruin your weekend. Enjoy the win.
Yeah. It's not like he's not Daniel Podence putting fucking videos up of or pictures up of bicycle kicks that hit row Z in the North Bank.
I love that.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, that is just quality content, isn't it? When it comes down to it, that well, yes, I could have just played a simple ball back, but I did look fucking wicked doing the doing a bicycle kick. I guess Garth pull it back to a couple of the statements on the not anti-Neves side, but in terms of him potentially not coming in. Do you think that potentially his over-emotional mental state, for want of a better term, and I know he has consistently picked up about 10, 11 bookings a season. A lot of it this season, obviously, he is captain, which does play a part into it. But do you think that a lot of that heightened intensity around decisions and situations has been impacted by how poor the team is? So he has been at certain points carrying the team this season.
This wasn't an issue until Lopetegui was on the scene. Let's just put this into context. Yeah. This wasn't a thing until Lopetegui. So this is the perfect storm of Neves and Lopetegui. I don't think this is an epidemic thing that we've had since he's joined the club. So I think the way that Lopetegui and his backroom staff hasn't helped in this scenario, and then Neves as captain maybe deploying his message then makes it a little bit more apparent.
Yeah, and I think say it didn't happen before Lopetegui come in because nothing happened before Lopetegui come in. The whole thing was a shambles.
What a beauty!
I mean,
Dan's hard at work, I see.